Hello, everybody. This will be my last lecture for the course. And what we're going to look at is something that is very rarely covered in police courses and something I feel that's extremely important. And that is the mental health of the officer and the toll of the job. Something that very rarely is given, I think, the due that it deserves. All right, and of course, this is not going to start the way that it should. There we go. So what we're going to look at is the toll of the job. All right, police are human beings too. And when we have discourse and we have conversations about police, law enforcement, and actions that are taken, this is frequently forgotten. When we look at a police officer, we want Superman. We want someone that follows the law to the letter and does everything right, and more importantly, is without human imperfections. The fact of the matter is everyone has human imperfections. And we need to recognize that law enforcement is a really, really tough job. It's incredibly stressful. And there are very few outlets to relieve that stress. And the stress is so unique that officers frequently band together as a group and don't air the stress among themselves as opposed to the community. And when one is in many life and death situations, we also have to realize the reality of PTSD and the impact that has on the human beings that we are asking to enforce our laws. All right, I'm going to just go over a few things. First thing is that policing, these are symptoms, and again, things that I just want to point out, not to discourage you into policing, but more as a call for more action on the part, for more programming that deals with officers to constructively work with stress and work on their mental health. But police officers have one of the highest rates of divorce of any profession in the country. And the reason for that is simply what works on the street doesn't typically work at home. When police are on the street, they need to control a certain situation to protect their safety and the safety of the community. As a result, it's a very command-oriented, and it's not a relationship among equals. When an officer tells you to do something or an officer puts his or her lights on, you better stop and you better do what that officer says, or there are going to be consequences. While that works very well on the street in protecting an officer, when an officer comes home, an officer has to change personality completely, because spouses and kids don't want to be told what to do and then have to deal with consequences. And it's a transition that many officers find hard. And many times is difficult in a family dynamic. Increasing the stress of this is the fact that officers often work erratic hours and work multiple shifts. So as a result, that compounds the stress level and can make it more difficult for families. For example, if there's a crime scene that's going on, an officer may need to miss something at school. And a child that wants to see dad at a soccer game loses dad to a crime scene. And that's something that can sometimes be very painful to a child and can be painful to a family staying together. Domestic violence. Keep in mind that command and control. Do what I say or there will be consequences. Doing that in a marriage or in a relationship does not work. And unfortunately, one of the things we see is that police officers also have very high rates of domestic violence. And more importantly is there's not a constructive outlet for them to talk about this and work through it and manage and manage the personality change that needs to happen. Also, these domestic violence situations are more likely to end up in injury because the fact that the perpetrator is an officer. That means that the other victim of the domestic violence has closed a number of outlets where a victim can normally go for help. A victim of domestic violence normally goes to the police. But does it do any good to go to the police when you're going to the officer's friend and then the officer comes home afterwards and has to deal with the confrontations? Also, substance abuse is incredibly high. First of all, I want to make one very strong statement. Addiction is a disease. It is not a personal failing. It is genetic. Two people can use the same substance. One person becomes addicted, one doesn't. That's not moral character. That is a difference in genetic makeup. Anyone can have an addiction. Problem is that in law enforcement, there's a lot of barriers to treatment. First of all, police culture doesn't make addiction very easy to admit. Second, addiction can frequently involve an officer having to confess to some sort of illegal activities, and that confession to illegal activities can cost him or her her job. And finally, when working through addiction, one of the most popular forms of addiction treatment, not one of the most effective forms of addiction treatment, is to be with other addicts and talk through urges of addiction and things that can keep people away from substances that hurt them. Now, the problem is if one's a police officer, that might involve working with people that he or she has arrested. And that becomes I'm looking for the right word, a very challenging road to walk, where addiction treatment requires working with addicts, but those addicts are people that have paid penalties and that you've enforced penalties on as part of enforcing the law. Just a tough area. Now, the last point I want to make, and this is actually an email I got last week that I'm just sharing, is finally there is a realization that police have a very tough job, and that police are not supermen. They're not. And as a result, we're start seeing the first, and I hope this is the first of many, of a Department of Justice initiative focusing on police mental health. And I hope this continues, and this is the first of many. With that, I wish you the best of luck on your final papers and your essay this week. Take care and have a good one.